Today, inside the vault, Fred and I break down ways to apply this week's virtue as believers, husbands, fathers, and friends. Whoever you are and wherever you are, we're glad you made it. Are you ready? Let's get back to good. Okay, welcome back to good. Man, Fred, good to see you. We're kicking off. Tell the people what we're talking about. Tee us up for this one this week, man. This is going to be good.
Hey, we're talking about endurance. This is probably a topic that a lot of people have struggled with at some point, regardless of what level your faith is. I think it's also something that is very practical, but also very spiritual in how you approach it in any situation, any circumstance. But digging into it just a little bit, just hopefully giving people a little bit more insight into how they can sustain their strength through some difficult or challenging times, and knowing the difference between when you're being developed and proven versus when there's a redirection and correction. So this should be fun.
Yeah. So this one is one of those ones where sometimes Fred and I will have a clear understanding of where each other stands on it, or we've talked about it leading up to the episode. And I'm not going to lie, this one is maybe this one should be called off the hinges and not back to good, or more off the cuff. We're back to good, but we're off the cuff on this one a little bit. Not that we don't have our own opinions on it, but we haven't. It's never rehearsed anyway, but we haven't even really discussed this. We just knew it was coming up. But this was so I just hosted Bree and published that last week, and her story is fantastic. So if you haven't heard it, please go listen to it. She's man, such a dear friend. And her story, just in a quick, less than 30-second wave top, was I met her over 10 years ago, 2014 to 2015. She was a Marine Corps sergeant at the time. Now she's a Marine Corps captain. So she became an officer, went through the commissioning program. But I met her on a deployment, and she had recently lost her husband, who was also a Marine non-commissioned officer. She had lost him to suicide. So she, at a younger age, became a widow to a very tragic thing that happened to her, and really felt herself being called to endure and press through that traumatic experience, the loss of a husband, and just a really, they were one. That's the way she believes. She's also a fellow believer. So it ripped her heart out.
Yeah.
And she's just such a strong, kind woman that shows a lot of resolve, shows a lot of grit. But when I think of endurance, and having her as a guest was fantastic. But I think of the joy and the calm and the composure that she brings into a space that is difficult to endure. And I say joy deliberately because she just has this warmth about her and this joy that really can't be explained or expressed. It's hard to prove it. And I'm going to say that word deliberately. It's hard to prove it at times when you find people who endure well. And there is such an aspect to endurance. And I'm not talking endurance athletics or endurance training, which is useful and helpful.
Absolutely.
But I'm not talking about I know I'm going to go out and run X number of miles or do this really long endurance athletic competition. You know what that looks like. You know the framework, and you know the end that's in sight. I'm talking about some hardship, some suffering, some testing, some trial, some things you are called, or maybe you didn't feel so called, but you've been thrown into the hopper to endure. What does that look like? And what is the spiritual element that we all have, regardless of our faith stance or our worldview? There is an emotional, a spiritual, and intangible facet of endurance that reigns supreme on this virtue. I'm confident of that. So with that sort of framing, and please go watch Breeze, because I think it will really challenge and encourage you. But with that mindset, stepping into this, what sits there in front of your mind, Fred, when it's either something you're going through or have recently gone through, or just your experience with this virtue and challenge, which I know we both believe it's important, endurance?
I feel, again, always my opinion, I feel every believer is always in some, on some journey from either successfully completing one in the beginning of another. I, I don't think there's ever been a time in my life that I haven't had to endure something. I do think there are ebb and flows that happen, but there's always either something about to happen or something that is culminating. And I think what you learn, or what I have started to learn, is, um, and again, I want to be very specific. We're talking about when we are being challenged to develop our faith, when we are being challenged to grow and mature, when we are being challenged to be prepared for the next level or the next assignment. I'm not talking about when we are, out of place. I'll just say it
Right.
that way because that can become very subjective. But when we know we're not doing what we should be doing or where we should be, that's not what that's not what I'm referring to about enduring something, right? There's
Right.
there's there's the chastisement that comes with something when God's trying to redirect versus no, you need to stay in it. It feels uncomfortable. It doesn't it almost feels like sometimes you're not in the right place.
Hmm.
Oftentimes for me, when I'm going through something that is forcing me to develop. And I know Josh and I, we both are physical people in the sense of we believe our bodies are temples and we work them right. So we understand that concept of the tearing of muscle fibers creates larger muscles, and that's a very simplified way to think of it. But we know there has to be some
That's
pressure.
about all I understand about it. So thanks for keeping it simple for me. Laura's
But
the
when there's
smart one when it
pressure,
comes to the
right?
body.
There has to be some pressure,
Right.
even if, scientifically, right, with diamonds, with coal, right, that pressure on that stone produces the diamond. Think about seed time and harvest. A seed has to go through some type of crushing or some type of breaking in order for that harvest to come through. So it's divine in the sense that we have to endure. There has to be some weight, some pressure, something that forces us out of our comfort zone. That's one, I think. And then number two, it forces us, and I think you mentioned a little bit, I don't want to go too deep, but it starts to talk about how we have to press into our faith.
Hmm.
And those two things to me are always developed during that in between phase. It's not at the end. At the end, it's almost like you look back and you go, okay, it's easy to say, ooh, I did it. Or at the beginning when you're not going through it, but it's something when you're in the middle of it. How do you stay consistent when you're in the middle of a thing? How do you make sure that you stay focused? For me, Josh, it is always about focus. Oftentimes, I believe the enemy's attack is always in getting me to look at something else.
Hmm.
And personally, for me, at the beginning of any type of journey that I'm about to take, I always receive a word. And we can debate how you receive that word. I believe it's a dropping in my spirit. I know something.
I ain't
It's
trying to
something.
bait nothing with you.
Right.
I believe you.
Look, whatever relationship a person develops in hearing from God,
Right.
I usually hear something. There's some download. I can be more transparent. That's what I call it. There's a download that I will receive, and a lot of times it's kind of like, that's interesting. Why is that in my spirit? Why am I feeling the need to do X? Right? And oftentimes it's that direct thing that is going to sustain me through that period
Right.
as long as I stay focused. But often, man, it's in the middle when the pressure starts to hit that we start to look to other things. It could be our emotions, it could be our circumstances, it could be to other people, to other things, to other vices. And I feel for most, or at least in most of my situations, my ability to stay focused on what he has said at the beginning allows me to see the end.
Hmm.
And to me, also, I'll tell you another thing, and I want to hear your thoughts. The duration of it is in my ability to be consistent. I often feel like God is looking for consistency
Yeah.
because a lot of times we'll start really strong, and then a couple of weeks, months, whatever. For some of us, I've endured some things for years that
It's
I've
like
had
that
to deal
January
with.
1st gym membership, baby.
Hey, man, and it's always that like mid-February Valentine's, folks. For those of us who go to the gym, we're always waiting for the numbers to drop because we know right after Valentine's Day, folks aren't coming back. But
Yep.
but there's something about again that sustainability and the consistency that I think he's looking for, man. And a lot of times people fall off because they start really strong, but then in the middle of it, man, they get frustrated and their faith fails,
Hmm.
and that's because they haven't strengthened it. So
Yeah. And I think faith is from a, let's just say it exactly what it is from a Christian perspective, if you choose to believe that way, or if you choose to read the Bible, or even if you read the Bible and say, hey, that's a good book, it has good ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to it maybe the way Josh and Fred do. But faith is the evidence of things hoped for. And when you think of this daisy chain of events, when you're talking about endurance, and hope is one of the ones that's in there, that is an outcropping at the end of a line of things that precede it.
Yeah.
And it starts with, okay, you're going to have some form of suffering. Now, it's not saying that the only way you get to hope is through suffering,
Yeah.
but it is a cause and effect. This produces this, produces this. So it starts with a suffering, and it produces, and I would say has the capacity to produce
Love it.
endurance. And at each one of these production events, if you will, there is a choice.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
confronted with suffering. Okay, so what?
Yes.
And if it's the right so what, if you press in faith and you press in patience and you are consistent and you are committed and you do rely on more than your own strength and might to endure that, whether that be in the form of both and God and others around you, and have strong counsel or brothers or sisters who will shore up with you and sort of bear that load with you, do it together. That's good. But it produces endurance. And then that endurance, if you endure well, produces character. And that takes time. And I
Yes.
love what you said about the diamonds, the seeds. The earth and nature is riddled with just so many tangible, practical analogies and pictures
Absolutely.
of, hey, wake up and look at the world around you, not the screen in front of you. I mean, the actual living world around
Right.
you, and watch the process of things becoming more
Yes.
beautiful and becoming, transforming into their true purpose and
Yes.
useful purpose. And
Yes.
that's not just a coincidence. That is a very intentional design from a very thoughtful, loving creator who
Yes.
goes, in order for you to fulfill the purpose that I have set you out to fulfill, there's going to be a process. And that
Yes.
process is going to be pressure, and it's going to be painful. And you have to be patient because it will take the fullness of time. And the
Yes.
fullness of time is gonna suck. And
Yeah.
I'm with you always, even to the ends of the world. What
Yeah.
does that look like?
Yeah.
Ouch. It
Yeah.
hurts. I'm impatient. I'm jittery. I want the answer now. I want to prove it. Can't prove it.
Yeah.
I want it now. Gotta wait. I want it to be comfortable. Embrace the suck. And you go, why?
Yeah.
Because you're made for so much more,
Yeah.
Josh. That's why. And I don't like that. But it doesn't matter if I like it. If I
Yeah.
believe it in faith,
Yeah.
then I have to hope for the joy that comes on the back end of this is maybe a transformation in my own head, hands, and heart that looks more like who I'm supposed to be. And there's so much about that, man, that in the process, there's not always clarity. There's not, rarely there's comfort. But I think the little small examples, not even on a spiritual realm, just on a physical realm, there's something in that muscle, literally, of discipline. Where if I'm consistent with my, let's just take, physical training
Yeah.
for an easy analogy. If I'm disciplined in my nutrition and in my training and in my rest and in my everything, there's so much that goes into that.
Yes.
There will be some tangible outputs that I can see in my strength and in my physique and appearance and just the way I posture myself, literally posture myself. Well, the
Due
same
season, man.
holds.
Due season.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the fullness of time is required. And what's hard though for me is when I don't know that timeline. I like to plan and I like to control. So what happens when you're out of control and when you don't have a plan because you've never experienced it? It's hard. It's hard. It's real. So I think when we jump into this, the buckets of head, hands, and hearts, how we frame it in our mindset, in our daily practice, and then just sort of the spiritual connection. I like that because it's simple. But I'm going to give us just a spiritual anchor for these, and I'm going to push this out for everybody before. So we're recording this, of course, before we release it. So between now and the time that I actually drop this on Monday, over the weekend on Substack, I'll release these notes just so you all can hear this, and then you can give feedback if you found this useful or not. It's sort of like a little read ahead. You don't get the conversation of Fred and me until we drop it, but you can get a little bit of the insight into like where are we going with this. So maybe you can follow along and it might be useful. But James 1:2-3 says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness," or some might say endurance. So that verse, just before I go on into some other stuff, how does that sit with you? I know it's a familiar verse to you, but how does that sit with you in relation to this topic of endurance?
I mean, you have to know that hard times are going to come. I mean, as a believer, we were never ever promised, and if we're honestly really understanding what it's like to be a Christian, it's to follow in the steps of Christ. And as you know, I mean, his ministry was 3 years, and there was nothing easy about it. So
Right.
it's the trials, the pressure. It's going to come and it's going to happen. But there's the second part to it, and that's the part that you should be focused on, which is what I was talking about earlier. About what you really should be focused on is to know that it's the outcome is going to be for your betterment. It is going to be to take you closer to the place of where you're supposed to be and to make you look even more like Christ. And I
Right.
think that's the part that we sometimes, again, that whole focus part, the consistency that we've been talking about.
Yep.
We lose track with that, right?
Right. Yeah. And it sits with me interesting too, because when you look at these things and when I framed it on really when I was going out and I was looking at the beginning of the week and I framed how do we, hold fast to confident hope when there's no way through the storm, but through it. And then when I did my ruck, and right before I went out on my ruck, I just mowed the lawn earlier in the week, and I saw like the edge work, and like it looks nice to see cut grass. There's little things, but the little details are what really matter to me. Like if I see a guy who cuts his lawn, but he has the weeds growing all over the edge of his sidewalk, and he could actually just edge it and make it look clean or sharp, it just looks pretty bush league, man. It's
Yeah,
like he took the time to work. Why didn't you get that little thing?
right.
And as I was walking out, getting ready to go on my ruck, it hit me. I said, this might seem like a weird reach for a connection, but it was actually one of the easiest connections for me to make is the capacity to endure under load and under pressure comes from doing the little things right consistently when you don't think they matter.
Yes,
Again, enter in an easy analogy of maybe lifting heavy weights under load. If I don't have good form and I don't practice the perfect repetition with only the bar with only 20 kg on it, what do you think is going to happen when I try to load that thing up and actually squat? If I'm misaligned, if I'm not bracing,
right.
if I and that's not what I'm trying to make this podcast about, but it's an easy, practical example that has actually a really good, um, invisible and spiritual application.
Yeah,
That if I don't have the focus and I don't have the commitment and the consistency to be trustworthy in the little things,
yeah,
I'm gonna crumpled up.
yeah,
I'm gonna get scorpioned underneath that bar
yeah,
of pressure
yeah,
when I actually have to lift some real weight in my life, when
yeah,
I actually have to endure.
yeah,
And so there are so many things, man. And I thought about today. I was out doing some yard work. The girls are doing things. And I'm thankful for the ability, truly, and everything. I'm thankful for the ability to work, to go out, to model things with the girls. They come out, oh, dad, and like to have a positive attitude about it. Not that it's always fun, but
yeah,
I enjoy certain things because I can model it for my children. And it's a chance for me to practice my mindset, my posture, and my focus in every little choice I make in the day. And I'm thankful that through some repetition, God has brought that to the front of mind with everything I do. If I'm cleaning up the dishes, if I'm helping my wife with dinner, if I'm helping give the kids a bath or vacuuming the floor, even the stuff I don't like, those little things, if I'm faithful in them, and it says that scripturally, but if I can be trusted with those little things, I can be trusted with more.
yeah,
And so I think that's the connection there is it's saying in James, count it joy when you meet trials of various kinds, not just the same thing over and over, but like when you're getting hit from all sides with different types of
yeah,
trials, you should be thankful for that and count it a joy because you know that at the end of that, that is testing your faith and that is producing your endurance. It's
yes,
building the good form holistically of those muscles, that spiritual, emotional muscle you need to do it well when it gets heavier, when it gets
right,
longer, when you don't see the
right,
end of the tunnel.
right.
And I think that's real from a behavioral science input, because I wanted to weave some of this in because someone else had asked me like, hey, when you do some of this, it's cool, but I'm curious on like some of the backdrop of the research you're doing. So there's one that's called logotherapy. You can look it up. It posits that our primary drive is the will to meaning. So when individuals find purpose in suffering, they can endure hardships more resiliently. And that's true. It goes back to like maybe some of the stuff you feel like, oh, I'm really having to endure this. Well, are you
Yeah.
even doing something that you should be engaged in the first place?
Right.
So that could be just cause and effect of your decisions. So, oh, hold on. We have a friend joining us. Come here. Yeah. Can you say hi, Mr. Fred?
Hi, Mr. Fred.
Hi. How are you? Are you enjoying this?
Say yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Said
Oh, it's
joining
so
us.
sweet. I love it.
Can you tell
I
him? Say,
love
I'm
it.
excited to go to Disney with you.
I'm so excited to go with Mr.
To Disney.
To Disney to you.
We are excited as well. Can't
He's
wait.
excited. Can you tell him what tomorrow is here in Norway? Say, Setnemai. Setnemai. Oh, Norwegian Constitution Day.
Are you excited about all the parades?
Okay. Can you go see mommy?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's worth the interruption.
Absolutely.
Always,
Absolutely.
100% of the time. That's why we're here. No, so this logotherapy and that, I think that's true because even talking with Brie the other day, when we dropped that episode, and she said, the endurance is easier for me when I actually feel like I have a purpose to be enduring for.
Mm,
So you can look into some of the research on that. And I'm not saying I agree wholly with all of these things, but there's just different research that's been done to show that when it's aligned to your purpose, it's more meaningful. And you do have the strength, the spiritual strength that sustains you through to the end of that trial or test, whatever that may look like for you.
yeah.
And I think it does relate to what's being said there in James. That if you count it joy and you realize that this is a part of the process and it is a
Yeah.
part of your purpose, is that you have to go through this.
Yeah.
It makes it a little bit more bearable. So instead of asking like, hey, why is this happening to me? You can say, what meaning for my actual purpose can I find
Yeah.
in the midst of this experience? So I think reframing things from a woe is me, I just can't wait to get out from under the pressure of this. This might sound a little weird or maybe even a little sadistic, but like if you're not feeling pressured, I would ask like, are you actually in stride with your purpose?
Mm,
Because I think life teaches us that pressure comes on the heels of like stepping into your purpose,
yeah.
and it's always going to be there. And you almost get more comfortable with that. Like a good physique and a healthy body comes from the pressure of weight training and resistance training. And you actually like, I come to miss it. I don't like it when I go a week without training. It feels weird. And that's not to say like, oh, I'm just this huge fit machine, but I'm just saying like you come to appreciate the value of it so much that when it's almost when the pressure's not there, you go like, ooh, something's off here because I'm not really having a chance to grow. So I think the mindset for that is everything. So just challenge yourself. I would challenge the listeners, challenge yourself to really frame when you're getting pressured. First of all, is this something I should be actually enduring? Or am I plugged into the wrong thing right now? Because there are some things that maybe you think you're called to endure and you probably shouldn't be wrestling with that thing at all. Like, so that might just be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. But if you're confident that you are plugged in to your calling and your purpose, buckle up because it's gonna suck at times, and you won't know where the end of that's at. But that's where real growth comes. So
Let me add this in too, Josh. I feel
please
like
do.
this is hitting me a little bit. I completely agree with everything you just said. In addition to that, I would also say it is okay to also have periods when life isn't full with pressures. That
Yeah,
that
of
that that
course.
sometimes people feel, and I think you and I've talked about this, off camera, that when we're not engaged in multiple things and doing multiple things and feeling that need to do the next thing, we sometimes feel like we're not utilizing time as wisely or not being as, here's the word, productive. But there are times of rest. And again, I just want to throw it in there. I'm not taking away anything from what Josh says. What he said is absolutely right. But I will tell you, as a person who has grown accustomed to feeling like he always needs to be moving.
Right.
My wife is teaching me sometimes stopping and taking a rest is just as valuable as the movement and the propensity and need to continue to move forward. So
Right.
again, all within balance. Again, there are peaks and valleys and all kinds of things through our journeys. Just know it doesn't always have to be stressful or I don't want to say stressful. I don't like that word intense. There are
Right.
some moments that God just wants us to sit, like just sit, stop, take a step back, take a moment. A lot of times he's refueling us, and oftentimes it's really for our physical bodies. Because I mean, sometimes I'll speak for myself. Mentally, I can keep going, and then my body will just say, "No, you're done."
Please stop.
And I eat pretty good. I eat pretty well. I try to, I'm exercising the whole thing, but your body can take but so much. And every now and then you need to take that step back. So again, I just want to throw that in for folks who I know are the, overachievers, A-type personalities. I get it. We understand it. We get it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
also understand that rest is just as important. And even to our analogy on weight training, believe it or not, growth happens not in the gym, it's outside of the gym. Right.
Right.
So just understand that whole concept. There's a balance to it. Anyway, go
There
ahead, brother.
is. No, it's good. And I think that tees it up nicely into the hands portion of this and just sort of the daily practice of enduring well. And again, I'll frame it first off. There's Galatians 6:9 says, "Let us not grow weary of
Yeah.
doing good, for in due season." Again, there's
Yeah.
a time frame on it. There's a
Yeah.
season to it. We will reap if we do not give up. And that has such a gardening or like farming mindset. But
Yeah.
imagine if you got motivated, like Fred said. Yeah, you start strong.
Yeah.
You went out there and maybe even worked the field and you till it up and you pulled out all the barriers and obstacles and roots and stones and you got the soil looking really nice and you cast that seed out and then you stop.
Yeah.
And you never water.
Yeah.
You never sustain. You never nurture. You never nourish. You never go out and pick those weeds when they start cropping up, those dandelions that the kids might like to blow them and they might look fun and yellow, but they're just choking the life out of everything around them. But how true is that to our lives? We do this work and we see these things that start creeping in and we grow weary in doing good. So we let stuff come in and it sounds relevant because I just mowed my lawn again. And while I'm out there and I get so frustrated with these things, I actually have to dig them out, like get their little bulbous root out of the ground so they're not choking out the really nice looking
Yeah.
grass. And the girls love the way it looked, but my maturity and my experience goes, those things aren't flowers that you want in your lawn. They're terrible. But it's so funny that I think the maturity of just my experience with that and doing landscaping and lawn care and all of these things made this really quick connection to like when we're trying to endure a spiritual level of maturity from someone who understands and appreciates what endurance actually looks like on a invisible and intangible aspect of life goes, man, there is some hard work that's done between the bookends of that trial or pressure, and the consistency is something I can't get weary on. I can't let up on those little things because
Yeah.
if I don't get those weeds out of there, the stuff I'm actually trying to grow in my life will get choked out.
Yeah.
And it might look enticing and it might actually look appealing to other people,
Yeah.
but I know what I'm trying to grow here is grass.
Yeah.
I know what I'm trying to grow here is a fescue, and
Yeah.
that fescue is not going to grow with dandelion weeds all up inside of it. So you might not even know what I'm trying to put in this field, but I know.
Yeah.
And I know that ain't it.
Yeah.
And so my endurance and commitment to work that crop, to work that field, the season and the space between when it sort of germinates and then blooms into its full state of what I know it should be, that's work. And it's not comfortable. And it
Yeah.
takes the fullness of time. And in that fullness of time, there's a lot of work to be done. And so I think just the daily practice, the daily repetitions, the small little details are everything.
Yeah.
And I won't say the devil's in the details. I'll say the goodness is in the details.
Yeah.
Let's flip it on its head. Like the goodness of a really well-earned stretch of enduring something comes in how you handle those little minuscule details that people won't see until you get to the end product. They won't. So I think that's where my mind lands on this for the hands and the practical application of endurance and enduring, and even a relationship that may endure. Maybe
Yeah.
it's not pressure, but just like, do I want something? And the other, to coin the term endure in a different light, do I want this relationship with Fred to endure,
Yeah.
like to stand the test of time,
Yeah.
let's say? How does it endure? It takes a lot of honest, hard work and intentional connection
Yeah.
and revisiting this relationship so it doesn't burn off. So, not even always from a pressure or a stress or a hardship, but just like in the other aspect of an enduring relation, uh,
Yeah.
that takes focus. It takes
Yes.
investment. It takes my
Yes.
time and my energy and all of me.
Yes.
So, that's, I think, a practical application to flip it a little different perspective. But yeah, over to you on that. Like, how does that
Oh,
resonate with you?
oh my gosh. I don't even know where to start, dude. There's so many
Just
things you
go,
said I want to
go with it, go
touch
with it.
on. Um, Geez, man. Um, so let's start with the focus part. I will
Can I
tell
say
you.
I love it when we start and you go, man, I got a lot of thoughts on this, but I don't know where I'm going to go. And I can physically see you when you're like, yep, there we go. I love it. I love it.
The focus part, I will tell you, is absolutely has been my greatest challenge in my life.
Mm.
And I know it sounds strange knowing what you know about me, but it's one of those things oftentimes, and again, this is not to scare people because I think everyone's on their own journey. What is challenging for one person could be easy for the next. What is easy for one person could be challenging for the next. Oftentimes, my journeys have gone across years. I'm not telling you every journey is like that, but
Sure.
it has been a years in process and in progress.
Mm-hmm.
And about 18 months ago, I started one. And this was I think we talked about it like really early on. You may remember, may not. And I was telling you, I feel like I'm going through a character build journey. Like my
I do
character
remember
is
that.
being challenged, meaning they're just tweaks that I feel like God is trying to make. He's like, I'm getting you prepared for something. I don't know what it is, but it's
Mm-hmm.
something I'm preparing you for that I need for you to make these tweaks. And
Yep.
what I'm learning personally for myself is you can be doing something month after month. Just to give you again, I like what Josh is always talking about, practicality. Things like being fair, being consistent, being honest, being transparent, especially as a leader. Leader in your profession, but also leader in your household. You are engaged with your children, you're engaged with your wife. And sometimes you may not see that fruit so quickly.
Right.
It'll be months, weeks. You're telling your kids, do X every day. You're on it, you're on it, you're on it. And it's like 6 months later and you still don't see the fruit. And you're like, I've been saying this for 6 months. I've been doing this thing for 6 months and you still don't see it. And oftentimes, Josh, it's in those moments, man, that I'll get distracted and I'll say, why am I doing this? Why? Nobody else cares. Nobody else would put this much emphasis, like the word that you said, detail, into certain things and continue to press into certain items. And then I have to go back to what I told you before. I have to go back to my download. Well, what is it he told me at the beginning? Stay consistent, Fred.
Yep.
Stay consistent. I don't need for you to focus on what you see someone else doing or not doing, someone prospering, not prospering, someone else
Right.
being elevated and not being elevated. I need for
Mm-hmm.
you to stay focused.
Right.
Stay focused. So in the middle of the thing is the hardest time. That's the most critical. Again, at the beginning, it's real easy for us to have all the energy, right? And at the
Yep.
end, it's easy to look back and go, hey, I did that thing. But what happens when you're in the middle?
Mm.
It's almost like swimming in the middle of the pool. Like you got to do something. There's a
You better
decision
swim
you're
because there ain't no wall to grab.
right, right. You have to move forward. You have to keep moving forward. And
Right.
I'm telling you, I have learned for me the ability to 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 ground yourself in something. I'm going to say for me it's the word, but that's what I choose to use.
Mm.
Pull that scripture, whatever it is, those one or two things,
Right.
reminders, and sometimes it's a success from the past. Just knowing that you were able to finish something from the past has helped me in my present situation know that God is still faithful, know
Yep.
that He is still able, and know that He will see me through this thing, especially if He's already said it. It reminds me of
Right.
the point of the disciples when He was telling them about going to the other side. I'll see you on the other side. What they didn't know was in that in between, there was going to be a shipwreck. But he told them, he
Yep.
already told them, right? I'm going to see you on the other side. How many times have we started journeys and the journey got really rough and you didn't know how this thing was going to turn out? For me, it's going back to what he originally said. So again, believers, unbelievers, find something to be rooted and grounded in. Because
Mhm.
to me, that's the only way you're going to make it through in that middle part. When
Right.
you get to that middle part, when you can't really start over and you're not, and to your point, Josh, you don't know where the end is.
Right.
You are banking on it, hopefully being on the other side of whatever that next, trial tribulation is, but it could be months. For me, there's been some things that I have had to be consistent about for years, and I still haven't seen the full manifestation of what I believe God has for me. So, first point is that staying focused part. I think another thing that we often deal with when we talk about endurance, um, a lot of time, to your point, it's in the small things. I like what you were saying about it's in the little details. I like to tell my kids what you practice is what you will perform. So as
Mhm.
much as you think when the day shows up that you're going to be ready to handle that thing, if you haven't practiced, and I love how you talked about, I'm a big form person when it comes down to weightlifting. But if you haven't practiced the right form, if you
Right.
haven't, if you don't have the right posture, the right positioning, you will crumble on that day of performance.
Literally,
Literally, you will crumble. So
your
there's
body's
something,
gonna hate you.
right? It's just going to happen, man. So it's something about not forsaking those details. It's the small things, especially, even in hearing, again, whatever you choose to believe. I do believe I can hear from God, but that's, whatever. Um,
Yep.
it's in the small things, right? Did you hear God say, make the left instead of the right? Did you hear him tell you to leave on time versus being late? It's the small things, day to day activities that we sometimes forsake, thinking in the day when that pressure hits, man, we're not going to be able to endure.
Nope.
And we can't even
We
be
won't.
upset about it. It's like, how did you practice? Well, how you
Yep.
practice is how you're performing in this moment. So know that if your practice was subpar, your performance is going to be subpar. So don't
Sure.
forsake those small moments.
Sure.
Don't forsake the small
Yep.
moments. Stay
Well,
focused.
and I think this. What I don't want people to hear when I say this is that I'm making some false claim or promise of prosperity
Yeah.
or perfection. That
Yeah.
if you are faithful in little things, that is the stepping stone to grand success. I
Yeah.
will never subscribe to things that I can't see into the future and prove, which is nothing.
Yeah.
Um, but I do have faith through experience. So those experiences in the world around me can give evidence to the God I choose to subscribe to and put my
Yeah.
trust in.
Yeah.
So my own life and the lives of my family and children and nature around me is rich with examples of how he cares for my good. I believe that.
Yeah.
So when I say this, don't hear that I'm saying, "Ooh, this is really gonna make you prosperous one day." And again, just the way you maybe even frame that word, like how
Yeah.
are you trying to define
Right.
prosperity as a human
Right.
and human
Right.
flourishing? How are you trying to wrap your head around that one? I think it would probably look different if you really understood what we were here to
Yeah.
do and what we were about. Me as well. But in those little details, I do find that the only way you are going to grow and have success that maybe you rightly desire and have a longing for in your heart, whether it's occupationally, as a parent, as a husband, as a friend, that growth, like you said, it comes through the pressure and through maybe being cracked and broken and tested and tried.
Yeah.
So, and there's so many analogies that people can probably try to say the next words out of my mouth, what I'm going to say. So I'm not going to give you an analogy on this one. I'm just going to say, trust it because you can see a world riddled with examples around you. And that's not an accident. It's sort of a little bit of a roadmap to show you what's up ahead and how, yeah, you too can expect this, but there is something beautiful that can come from it when you're connected to the purpose.
Right. Ooh, that's
Um,
good.
when you're connected to the purpose. So I think a really nice analogy that Christ used with his followers when he was on earth is he said, "I'm the vine, you're the branches." So he's like, you got to stay connected to me. Um, but if you're not a Christian, I don't think that this is necessarily just a spiritual thing. If you have an organization, and you aren't all aligned under the same purpose, the same values, the same trajectory, the same mission, there's a lot of stray voltage. So
Yeah.
people might feel like they're doing good, but the collective you is going nowhere quick, fast, and in a hurry. And you aren't achieving things that you need to financially from a growth mindset. So like it's just these natural laws and orders that I believe God has ordained and sustained. They ring true for humanity because they're true because he ordained them, not because you chose to believe in them. So you can see the benefits or the consequences of whether you believe in and apply them or ignore them. And I think that comes with everything from physical training to spiritual training to mental training. You can't learn unless the Bjorks, it's a husband and wife psychologist team that did a lot of research on what they call desirable difficulties. And these desirable difficulties, they are difficult. And it's proven that the way you do spacing and interleaving and all these different things, my developmental people would like nerd out on it and love it. So you can look it up. It's pretty fascinating. But you can marry that side of research with learning and development where you need a challenge to actually learn and grow your mental capacity with another behavioral science aspect called self-regulation theory, which emphasizes the importance of setting goals, monitoring progress, and adjusting your behaviors to achieve that desired outcome or future state. So that process enhances your endurance by promoting consistent goal-directed actions. So let me weave this back in because some of y'all are probably like, man, you started with don't grow weary in well doing. And you're like grabbing for straws here, trying to take a behavioral science and connect it to a spiritual application. Wrong. I know what I'm doing on this one. When you receive, if you're a Christian, I'm just going to talk to believers right now for a second. And the rest of y'all can listen on in if you want to. When we receive instructions, like talking about praying the Lord's Prayer, and that's modeling. I think it's a model and an example of how we should approach every day our prayer life and our posture. And in that, he says, and we've talked about this before, give us this day our daily bread. Okay. If I'm going through something difficult, I can't wrestle and grapple and tackle that whole problem. That's just going to require a lot of time that I don't even know how long that is. Yeah. But what I can do is I can get the sustenance for the next few steps I need to take. And a really good analogy for that is I've done a lot of really long endurance training, like weighted ruck runs for hours on hours on hours on hours. I've done a lot of movement under load and a lot of like really tough endurance training before physically. And it actually takes a meal plan. So like the energy that I started with, I'm talking like the caloric energy and the food that I started with is not sustaining me at hour 3, at hour 5, at hour 7. And I've gone north of that before in a row, nonstop. How do you keep moving? I need the next bit of sustenance. I need to hydrate. I need food that's going to give me fuel. And I can't rely on what I had yesterday, and I can't wait for what's tomorrow because I need it now. Yeah. I need it immediately, right now. And I just think that connects to this idea of the little details, the little nourishments that you get, the gusts of wind in your sails along the way that you might get from an encouraging word or someone who reaffirms your purpose and your trajectory. It's important. So we can do that in community, but you also have to be plugged in to your purpose at all times. You can't waver on your focus. You can't waver on your intentionality of what you're doing. I'm not saying that when you do waver, like, well, you screwed it up, you can't get it back. But I'm just saying for that consistent growth to keep on moving in the right direction to the back end of that. Because there is, I believe spiritually, it's a trial and it's a test and there's a purpose in it that we don't know, but God does. And he expects you to go through these wickets of this test in order to come out the other end transformed more into the image of his son. And that's a process. So you have to trust him in it. And if you fight it, good luck with that one. I do it sometimes and it really sucks and it hurts. So I think when you break it down, if you take this self-regulation theory concept or don't grow weary of doing good in due season, do those little actions and those little disciplines, set yourself these small achievable goals of, you know what? I don't know what's going on in this season. I don't know, but I do know that he says, God tells me to trust in him with all my heart and in all my ways acknowledge him. And some simple things he tells me to do is in everything to give thanks and not to worry about anything, but by prayer or supplication, let my request be made known to him. So if I don't even know what to do, I'm going to be thankful in everything. I'm going to take all my cares and my worries to him. I'm going to be honest with him because he's a dad who cares about me. And I'm going to ask him, I don't even care where you're taking me right now. Please just give me the food I need for the next step I need to take, and then tell me where to step. And I'm going. And I have felt so lost as a husband and as a father and as a leader of my family on a lot of occasions before, man. And I didn't know where he was taking me. I didn't say I felt disconnected from my purpose or from my creator. I felt lost. I didn't know where we were going. And I don't like that because I'm out of control and I have to walk by faith and not by sight. And I don't like it when I can't see the end game because I'm a person. And in those moments, he calls me to be faithful with my girls and with my wife and with myself in the little things. How are you reading your word every day? To yourself and to your girls? How are you encouraging your wife? How are you doing the simple, easy things that you know you should do anyway? Just do those. Keep doing those really well. And I promise I got you on the big game. So you do your part. And then you let me be God and do mine. And let's both stay in our swim lanes on this one, shall we?
Yeah.
And when I can realize that he's got me, that pressure becomes more bearable. And then that verse that says, take my yoke because I'm easy.
Yeah.
And I go like, I've actually felt that, man. And I'm like you. I think we underestimate the power of the spiritual presence of God.
Yes.
And that he does, I believe you because I feel the same way. He does speak things to us and he does show us things. And then those verses flood back into my heart in a practical, meaningful way in the moment. And I go, this might not always be what this verse will mean to me, but right now that's exactly what I needed.
Right.
That is exactly the sustenance that my soul and my spirit needed in this moment. And it's radical. And maybe people that aren't believers can't even connect with what I'm saying. And I actually believe that maybe it's difficult to, but I think there are probably times in everyone's lives where they can't really explain it. They can't really prove it, but they know they had the energy and the endurance to keep going one more step. And that's what it felt like as I was dragging that step along and I was bloody and battered, but man, I kept going.
Yeah.
And that is not a physical capacity. That is a spiritual resolve that Fred and I just choose to believe comes from the one who made us.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I think that's where in the practical application, that's where it really resonated with me, man, because it's real. And as I share that just really quick snapshot, I won't even share the practical examples in my own life because those are for me. That's my story that not everybody needs to hear. And you don't get to because it's my story. But man, I could go on for days. And I know we all could. And I won't. They're like, please, God, don't. But that's man, it's very meaningful to me because that comes through a lot of pain.
Yes.
It comes through a lot of it.
Yes.
So yeah,
But
that's
isn't it
where I land
great
on.
though? I will add this another point. But isn't it great though, Josh, that at the end of it, how awesome of a father we have, that he removes I don't know if trauma is the right word from it, that we're able to continue to do it over and over and over again. Like there's something about being a believer. And again, to your point, this is where I'm speaking more to the believer, where we have this covering to know that, first of all, no test or trial is going to be placed before us that he didn't already ensure we were equipped to handle. To me, that's the first thing to be excited about. But to also know that when we've gone through very traumatic things, it doesn't affect us the same way. Somehow we manage, and not within ourselves, but God allows over time for the pain from the thing to lessen more and more, and the gift that came from the thing to be amplified in a way that it's the thing that sustains us.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think about just the pain of the thing, you would never want to go through anything else.
Right.
But it's something about knowing what you got from it. And it's not always a tangible thing. It could be the maturity, it could be the spiritual development, the financial, whatever blessing that could have evolved from the situation. Um, that the painful part, the cost, isn't greater than the outcome. And it's something about that. I have watched that in myself and other people, man. And I am grateful every time, again, I consider myself, blessed that I have been able to see the other side of being faithful and sustaining and enduring through really, really tough times to see
Right.
God's manifestation on the other side. And I just think there's something about that, that when you get on the other side, what you think will be still a painful situation, oftentimes it's not. It
Right.
just isn't. And other people who experience it without Christ look at you in awe
Right.
because they're trying to figure out, how did you stay sane through that? How are you able to maintain some sense of just mental stability without feeling like you were, I hate to use the word crazy, but just going to lose it, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you were going through that particular thing. And I can say nothing, but it was the grace of God that covered me in a way that the pressure of all that was happening didn't overtake me.
Right.
And I think that's just a powerful moment that I've seen time and time again in my own life after enduring. I'm gonna say it again, after enduring. Because
Yeah.
during the situation, you feel it. You feel it. It's
You
there.
do.
It's
You
real.
do, man. You do feel it. And it's, when you were talking about that just now, I don't know why this queued up in my mind, but I almost started laughing because I think of my little girls, and I relate this to like when I try to tell God that man, I can telegraph your past. You know what? You got me. You're trying to develop me into something, and I can tell you what you're trying to tell me. Let's just cut to the chase right now because we're so impatient. We are so impatient.
Yes.
And even in a fast-paced society, I think
Yeah.
societies have always been hustle and bustle and fast-paced,
Yeah.
but technology and I can get a quick answer on GPT. Like we are losing an art and a
Yeah.
need
Oof.
to sit with and wrestle with
Yes.
not having the answer right
Yes. Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And everything that is around us is inundating us with get it quicker, get it faster.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking this, man. I even use it sometimes for our outlines and I'll put in prompts to like challenge this theory or, show me where I have gaps based on research if I don't have as much time to like actually dumpster dive it all. So it's a brilliant tool. I'm not knocking technology. I think it's
Yeah.
fascinating and I use it a lot for a good purpose.
Yeah.
But there is something about, and eventually I'm going to read something out of a book because there's an old book that I have that's, I read it and I underlined it and I took margin notes in it. And that's why I love reading actual books at times because it just takes the physical act of slowing down and processing at a different, slower speed. That's really healthy and it's really needed. And of course, we all agree with that. And people that would like give me a north south head nod and be like, yeah, you're right. You're right. Will immediately, like, if they've even made it this far in the podcast, will immediately jump into the hustle and bustle again. So, how are you barricading off space in your schedule to sit with things
Yeah.
and to struggle with things and to be okay not knowing the answer?
Yeah.
Why I was laughing is because I'm like, I do that so much with God. It's like, I know where you're trying to go. Let's just get there. And it's like, I do that to my daughters. I will come in the room and get ready to tell them something like, hey, Murano girls. And they know when I say Murano girls, like that's sort of like the wake up call. All of y'all, stop what you're doing, face daddy, and respond that you heard me, right? And it's not some militant thing. It's just like they need to be trained that we look at
Absolutely.
people in the eyes, we respond, we're respectful, we acknowledge when we're spoken to. There's a lot of hidden things I'm weaving into their
Absolutely.
behaviors that I believe are really important for life when they
Yes.
become adults. And so I walk in and I did so to Emerald girls, and like two of them were like in La La Land. The other one turned around, yes, sir. And then it was the oldest one. I was like, girls, look at that. And they're like, and then little Karina, he just she's like, yes, sir. And I started talking. And funny enough, Aria, the one that was quick to respond and be respectful, was the first one to butt in. I started, hey, girls, I need you to. And she cut me off. She goes, oh, dad, you're going to blah, 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 blah. And I cut her back off and I said, can, can you not tell me what you think I want to tell you? And just let me finish what I need to communicate to you, please. And she just sort of like, we got this slumpy, like, she's like, sorry, dad. I said, well, you should apologize and I forgive you. But I said, I'm not going to say it's no big deal because it is a big deal. You don't
Yeah.
interrupt people and you don't assume And I said it deliberately this way because God hit me with it. And I said, you don't assume what the father is trying to say to the child. And God struck that with me. And he was like, yeah, but you do it too, man. And that's why I said it, because I was challenged. And I told them that. I said, hey, and I didn't like lose that opportunity. And sometimes I think it's cool when God gives you like in stride sort of like things that he wants you to reveal to your children.
Yes.
I said, I'm not judging you from a posture of I'm mad at you. Dad does it too. There's times when God is trying to show me something in life and I try to butt in and interrupt him. And he goes, can you just let me finish my sentence?
Yeah.
Can you let me finish the process? Can you let me finish this test or this trial? Because I know you think you know what the answer is.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Yeah.
And I know. And actually, if you would chill out, it's really good.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the thing that she was interrupting me for, she thought I was going to say, do bedtime routine, go to bed. And I was going to tell him, like, I'm going to let you have a little bit of candy and watch a show with me. And it's not always that thing.
Right.
Very rarely is it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, and I said, what if I just let us go with your idea of what I wanted you to do? I was like, what if we just jumped on what you thought it was going to be?
Ooh, this is
I said,
good.
you want to go that route? You want to brush your teeth and go to bed? No. I said, that's familiar, isn't it? You want to do that? No. No, we want the candy in the show. Of course you do. I said, don't interrupt the father. And I said, and I'm saying it that way specifically because you need to remember that in your relationship to God. So I think endurance, we want the interruption. We want to get the easy bypass. We want to go around it instead of through it. We know all the reasons and we know all the research and we have all the headspace, but transitioning from the head into the hands of actually living it out, we can theoretically or philosophically agree that we need this. And when it comes to the pain of doing this and living this, it's not comfortable.
Yeah.
And then we want the cop out, the scapegoat, the sidestep, give me the shortcut. And we know it's not good for us, but we want it because we're creatures of comfort.
Yeah.
And I think everything about the life of Christ and the life of people that I respect model embracing the uncomfortable because you appreciate your purpose needs the pressure and it needs the patience and it needs the fullness of time. And it is that simple. So reframing, I think, as we sort of transition from our hands maybe into like wrapping it up with our heart and like the spiritual side of it, that's really woven throughout all of it. But just asking ourselves, like, what daily habits am I staying consistent and faithful in to support whatever long-term goal my transformation requires?
Yeah.
So whoever I am trying to become, how am I making those daily investments in the little things where I can be trusted with that bigger thing? Because it is all connected.
Yeah.
There is, like you said, like you tell your little girls, and there's so many variations on that, but like your practice is going to be the way you perform. The way you show up every day in every little thing is how you will perform when you're actually really tested.
Yeah.
So you can't skip a practice with your team and expect to show up and really perform. And I'm not talking about performance that's uncontested, man.
Yeah.
Because maybe you can run a drill on a basketball court or a soccer pitch or something, but I'm talking when it's actually other people are trying to come at you, and they're trying to beat you.
Yes.
Or from a military standpoint, you're running like maybe a weapons range with no one shooting back at you. So you can train these certain skills to a certain level, but like when the real challenge hits, when it's either a team trying to score against you and beat you, or from a military standpoint, when there's someone trying to actually end your life the other way around, then all of those little times that you should have like woke up and took notes, you're going to wish you had.
Oh, yeah.
And the reality of life is we don't know when that test is going to come. So the practice and the small repetitions, we don't really have the opportunity, and we can't afford the opportunity to miss those chances. So I think that's why God encourages us to be faithful in the little things, to every day be thankful, be diligent, be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the works of the Lord. All these little things are like, it's so boring. It's the same thing. I want the big thing. He's like, you need it for the big thing is what I'm trying to tell you. And I think the older I get and the more he matures my spiritual muscle, the more I realize the little things are everything, man.
Yes.
And when it comes to endurance specifically, the little things are everything.
Yes. So
as we roll into this final piece, I mean, we already read it, but I'll read it again in Romans 5:3 and 4. So Paul says, not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, character produces hope. And a lot of the things that Paul would write, and this man would come from a place of like writing to the church while he's in jail. And he's talking about how he's known great abundance and lacking and plenty, having nothing. He's seen the spectrum of like everything in humanity and experienced it for himself. And he said, in everything I've learned to be content. And I think spiritually, as we get into like the spirit of suffering and endurance, I just really want to sort of like land our plane here for this episode and just sit here for a second with it, is learning to just be okay sitting in the suffering or the pressure and not just being thankful for it, but being content that maybe it won't go away.
Yeah.
Again, it's not that, oh, you always have to have this pressure or this test. And if you don't have it, like you said, the hustle and bustle person that needs the test to prove that they're being relevant. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like, he says, rejoice in sufferings. So like actually have some joy and some gratitude. Like people should look from the outside, I believe as a Christian, should look at things that are unbelievable and not even worth fathoming from an external perspective and look at the spirit that's inside of you and the spirit that flows out of you and go like, first of all, who are you and where does that come from? And how are you finding joy in that? And how can you actually tell me that you're contented? So you might not be satisfied with where you're at in your transformation journey, but you're content to sit here in this? Really? How? I think that's something different, man. So in that mindset, I want to hear your thoughts on this.
I mean, contentment is not this feeling of, first of all, we hadn't even touched on this, but I'll quickly just say this has nothing to do with our feelings. The ability to move past how you feel, um, and not allowing it to dictate your actions is absolutely a sign of spiritual maturity.
Yes.
Your feelings will always make you want to do something that's against what probably you should be doing. So contentment for me is equation to peace. And that peace does not mean perfection. It
Right.
means that you have grounded yourself, like I was saying earlier, for me as a believer, in the word, or there's something I'm holding steadfast to that I'm now unmovable.
Yep.
That's what peace is for me. When I now know for sure, I'm no longer uncertain. I think you talked about this earlier on what my purpose is
Mm-hmm.
and why I'm enduring this thing. That's that content. To me, that's the equation, the piece to contentment. The contentment is knowing that this is for my good, knowing this is going to take me to a higher level. And I'm not even talking about success. I'm referring to just spirituality and maturity and getting closer, refining my life more to be like Christ. To know that that's where this is going, I have contentment and peace in that. There's a level of peace, hey, like Paul says, that surpasses all understanding, that the world doesn't understand, that you could be experiencing something externally,
Right.
but internally, there is a level of peace and ease and calmness
Mm-hmm.
that to me only comes from Christ. So
Yes.
when Paul is talking about that's to me, when I hear the word to be content in something, it does not mean to be satisfied with being in a place of tension and confusion and
Right.
turmoil. No, 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 that's not it. The content part is being content in your peace, knowing that it's attached to a purpose, and know that that outcome has something to do with God's development for your life. And that to
Yeah.
me is more than anything.
Yeah. I mean, that same, the same author, the same man, Paul, uh, he writes, I press towards the mark of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. So
Yeah,
who is this man that has like this insatiable drive?
yeah,
That's what I think of in Paul, man. He was
yeah,
always going
yeah,
and he's pressing and he's moving and he's doing. And he goes, content.
yeah,
And that verse specifically, it's in Philippians 4, says, not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I've learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound.
Yeah.
In any and every circumstance, I've learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. And then the letter jacket slogan, Philippians 4:13, right? I can do all things through him who strengthens me. And you'll see that people like trying to bench, max bench press and all these things like, oh, I can do all things through Christ. And I'm like, I mean, I'm glad you put a scripture verse on your jacket, but I don't know if that's really where we're going with this one. But okay. Well, I'm sure I misappropriate scripture all the time too. So, but I mean, the heart of Paul is going like, I do have this insatiable drive and pursuit of who I know God has called me to be. And I'm not satisfied with where I'm at in that journey, but I can be dissatisfied or unsatisfied with where I'm at in this transformation process of becoming more like Christ. And literally in the same heartbeat and in the same breath, I can be content and at peace with who I am, whose I am, and I know that he has me. And you nailed it, man. That's hard to describe to someone who hasn't experienced the richness of a relationship with Christ and who hasn't experienced going through hard things with him. I'm not talking about just reading about it in the Bible and hearing other people's stories, which are useful and they can be encouraging when you're going through it. But I'm talking about actually feeling the presence of God walk with you through your valley and walk with you through the fire and walk with you through the pressure, and you feel him there. And then you go like, oh, you did tell David in Psalm 23 that you prepare a table before you in the presence of your enemy.
Yes.
You anoint my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy will be with me all my days. And I'm going to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And he's talking about that in the face of his enemies.
Yes.
And the king who he used to serve on the side of the battlefield is now chasing him, trying to kill him. And all these things are happening. So that heart of David, when he wrote these Psalms, also a man after God's heart, but he experienced things that he never imagined. And David is such a picture of Christ. And this is, I think, a good time to read this because I'm probably going to get people that argue with me, but I'm just going to challenge you to have an open mind as I read this to you, because there are things that when God sent his son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. That was his purpose. You go like, how did Christ endure all this stuff? Even if I don't choose to subscribe to him being God, I can read historical accounts and know that he went through a lot of stuff. How did he endure that? His purpose. It drove him. His identity drove him to endure in physical form, 100% man, 100% God. So I'm not going to say this saying that Jesus is not fully God or that he's not omniscient, that he doesn't have the full capacity of being God, part of the Trinity. But I do think there are things about the character of God that I cannot explain, that I cannot define, but you can see hints of it in Scripture. And you can see hints of things within the relationship of God the Father to God the Son to God the Holy Spirit that I don't think man will ever be able to explain because we aren't God. But again, I take them by faith. And I think a really cool script I'm going to read really fast comes from a book by an author, Max Lucado. It's called He Chose the Nails. And when you want to think of enduring, just think of not just the physical pain through the story of like Christ's death on the cross. And of course, that's extreme. That's extreme. But again, we're talking about the spiritual side of it. So there were things that Jesus experienced when he was taking on him the sin of the world from a spiritual aspect that he as God had never experienced before. Mm-hmm. I believe that. And the way that Max writes this, I really like it. So I will read it quickly. But he goes, what's the fruit of sin? Step into the briar patch of humanity and feel a few thistles. Shame, fear, disgrace, discouragement, anxiety. Haven't our hearts been caught in these brambles? The heart of Jesus, however, had not. He had never been cut by the thorns of sin. What you and I face daily, he never knew. Anxiety, he never worried. Guilt, he was never guilty. Fear, he never left the presence of God. Jesus never knew the fruits of sin until he became sin for us. And when he did, all the emotions of sin tumbled in on him like shadows in a forest. He felt anxious, guilty, and alone. Can't you hear the emotion in his prayer in Matthew 27:46? My God, why have you rejected me. These aren't words of a saint. This is the cry of a sinner. And I'm not saying that Christ sinned, but he became sin for us. So imagine that, someone that for eternity had been in perfect union with his Father, whatever that relationship looks like as a Godhead, right? And then it goes, and this prayer is one of the most remarkable parts of his coming. But I can think of something even greater. Want to know what it is? Want to know the coolest thing about the coming of Christ? Not that the one who played marbles with the stars gave it up to play marbles with marbles, or that the one who hung the galaxies gave it up to hang door jams to the displeasure of a cranky client who wanted everything yesterday but couldn't pay for anything until tomorrow. Not that he in an instant went from needing nothing to needing air, food, a tub of hot water, and salts for his tired feet, and more than anything, needing somebody, anybody, who is more concerned about where he would spend eternity than where he would spend Friday's paycheck. Or that he resisted the urge to fry the two-bit self-appointed half hall monitors of holiness who dared suggest that he was doing the work of the devil. Not that he refused to defend himself when blamed for every sin of every slut and sailor since Adam, or that he stood silent as a million guilty verdicts echoed in the tribunal of heaven and the giver of light was left in the chill of a sinner's night. Not even that after 3 days in a dark hole, he stepped into the Easter sunrise with a smile and a swagger and a question for Lucifer that probably sounded like, is that all you've got? Is death? You want to know the coolest thing about the one who gave up the crown of heaven and endured the crown of thorns for you is that he did it for you, just for you. And I love that, man, because that picture of like God even endured something that God never needed to or had to endure, or avoided the fact that he loves us so much. And so that call to endurance is something greater than ourselves. It's to become something and be plugged into something greater than ourselves. And on a spiritual sense, we can't even define it.
Yeah.
We can't even imagine it. I think a practical application, though, for me, and then I want to turn this back over to you and hear sort of your closing thoughts on all of this, is it's those little moments where we get a chance to recognize and to lift high the source of what we are called to endure. And for me, that's Christ. And that's my relationship with God. And I've had a lot of people, and I think you nailed it. There's times where we might not see it until the end of that trial or test, but there actually are also times where in long seasons of enduring well, not that it's always stressful or super high pressure, but I've had quite a few people in the past 6 months look at like the journey of my past year and a half through education, through things like even colleagues that have been on my different podcasts after we stop recording and sort of cut it up at the end and just how to go and whatever, sort of the quick feedback and chat before we sign off. And I've had a lot of friends go like, yeah, I have a question. How do you do all of this? Because from the outs, and once I had a few people start asking me that, I go like, God, you've gifted me something to not miss an opportunity to point them to like, it's not me that's sustaining me because I'm tired a lot. But I most recently had a really good friend who caught up with me again. And she goes, man, I look back at the past year. You went through the executive coaching college. You're doing your PhD. You're a full-time active duty Marine, a husband, a father. I don't know when you sleep or if you do sleep. You have all these initiatives. You're doing this podcast. I really love it. I'm really growing from it. I can't even do one of those things. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm Superman. That's why I do it. And I told her, I said, that's a really good question. And thanks for asking. I said, I don't get the strength and the sustenance on my own. I said, the disciplines of little things like learning how to manage a schedule, how to prioritize, how to communicate with my wife so I don't like just run that into the ground relationally with her. I said all these little things have become habits of thought and action that help me sustain all these other things now. So it's been a process. But I said, I really believe that the fact that you're asking me that and that I don't feel as stressed as you think I should feel highlights that it's not me sustaining me. It's because it's a purpose God has given me. So he's giving me the strength I need to do what you think is really hard endurance. And to me, it's just my calling.
Yes.
So I said, I'm not saying it's not exhausting or pressure. And I'm not saying that it doesn't call me to endure well. But I said, I'm actually fine here. And then it sunk in. I was like, that's what Paul's talking about being content. Because it's not that I don't feel the pressure of it, but actually it might not be as bad as other people are thinking, because it's just confirming to me that I'm right where I should be.
Yeah.
And I don't even know where he's taking it. every week that we come back. I don't know where he's taking this, but we're faithful and we're committed and we're consistent.
Yes.
And even if it's just for our little girls, or even if it's just for us, if this is all it was for, I'm content. It's enough. Not only is it enough, it's more than enough.
Yes.
And I don't even want to interrupt my dad to tell him the story he's trying to tell me, because Dad already knows what he needs to tell me. He just wants me to shut my mouth and patiently wait for him to speak. And it's going to be good. And that's where it lands on it for me, man. Like, endurance isn't so bad when I get to experience these moments where his richness and his love and his goodness never miss. They never miss, even in the difficulty, and actually in the face of and through the difficulty, because he doesn't tempt me, but he tests me. And you nailed it. He only tests me with the things that he has already given me to pass the test. So reframing it looks like, not God, why did you bring me here? But God, what have you taught me that has brought me here? And open my heart back up to the thing you've already spoken that gives me the sustenance to get through to the other side of this growth opportunity. So I'm thankful for it. I want to recall what you've already set me up for success with. Bring those things back to the front of my mind, because I need them and I need you now. And I know that you aren't teeing me up for failure. I can endure if I can recall. And I can recall your goodness because you've already told me and you've already showed me. And man, that was probably one of the most poignant things that I think you've said this whole episode. Is like, it's spot on. And I think even maybe a few months ago, Steve Furtick talked about this as well. Like, God doesn't tempt you. He gives you the keys to pass the test. He's already given you the lesson and taught you the thing you need. And it's so true. And when you can frame it that way, it's healthy to go like, ooh, I'm asking the wrong questions here. So that's where my heart lands on this, man. Like, endurance isn't about getting through the hardship. It's about being transformed in it. And it's a sacred journey. Like, how am I rooted? How am I resilient? How am I reflective of the hope, of the joy that comes on the backside of it?
The only two things I will say is what I said from the beginning: focus and consistency. That's it. Focus and consistency. That's, I mean, you tied the bow on it, dude. You tied the bow on it. We now have to practice it.
That's what this application was about, right?
The consistency of practicing what we now know, for all of us. For many people, this is a reminder, right? It's not new. We've known this. We're taught this from very young ages to continue to be consistent in practice and focus, right? It's just doing it.
Hey, do what Fred said. Get back to good. Put some work in. We'll see you soon. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Back to Good. Don't forget to follow Foundational Coaching on your favorite social media platforms. Fred and I are honored to be a part of your story today. We hope this conversation has helped bring your head, hands, and heart back to good.